Back in 1898, a writer named Morgan Robertson published a novel called Futility. Nothing too special about that. Just another disaster story. Robertson was a former sailor, kind of a nobody in the literary world at that point. His book told the story of this massive British ocean liner, biggest ship ever built. Unsinkable, according to everyone involved in building it. Packed with wealthy passengers, the absolute pinnacle of maritime engineering. In Robertson's story, this ship hits an iceberg on a cold April night in the North Atlantic and goes down. There aren't enough lifeboats. More than half the people on board die in the freezing water. Tragic, fictional disaster. The ship's name in the novel was the Titan. Now remember that name, because what happened 14 years later is going to mess with your head. In 1912, the White Star Line launches the RMS Titanic. At the time, it was the largest ship ever constructed. Everyone called it practically unsinkable. The builders, the press, everyone. It set sail on its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York, carrying some of the richest people on Earth. On April 14th, on a freezing night in the North Atlantic, it struck an iceberg and sank. There weren't enough lifeboats. Over 1,500 of the 2,200 people on board died. Now here's where your brain starts doing backflips. The similarities between Robertson's fictional Titan and the real Titanic aren't just close. They're weirdly, impossibly precise. Robertson's Titan was 800 feet long. The real Titanic was 882. Both ships had triple screw propellers. Both could carry around 3,000 people. Both sank in April. Both had lifeboat counts that technically met regulations, but were nowhere near enough for everyone on board. Robertson's Titan had 24 lifeboats. The Titanic had 20. The fictional ship went down about 400 nautical miles from Newfoundland. The real Titanic sank at almost the exact same location. Both disasters happened on cold April nights when the ship hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic. When the Titanic went down and shocked the entire world, Robertson's forgotten novel suddenly got dragged back into the spotlight. People accused him of being psychic. Others thought he must have been involved in some kind of conspiracy. How else could someone write such a detailed, accurate prediction of a disaster that wouldn't happen for another 14 years? Robertson himself wasn't having any of it. He insisted he wasn't psychic, wasn't a fortune teller. He was just a former sailor who understood maritime trends and had done his research. He pointed out that shipbuilding was obviously moving toward bigger, fancier vessels. He knew the North Atlantic in April was prime iceberg territory. He also knew that maritime laws about lifeboats were outdated and dangerous. Robertson claimed he hadn't predicted anything. He'd just done the math, looked at where things were heading, and written what seemed like a logical outcome. But even with that rational explanation, the specifics are still absolutely chilling. The name similarity between Titan and Titanic, the exact cause of both disasters, the precise location where both ships went down, the catastrophic loss of life because there weren't enough lifeboats. It's like someone took Robertson's fictional blueprint and used it to script reality more than a decade later. This isn't just a lucky guess. This is a detailed roadmap for disaster that played out exactly as written. It's the kind of thing that makes rational people start questioning whether time works in straight lines the way we assume, whether some people can somehow access information about events that haven't happened yet, whether the universe occasionally shows its hand in ways that shouldn't be possible. Robertson's story forces us to deal with seriously uncomfortable questions. Was this just an educated guess that happened to be remarkably on point? Or was Robertson somehow tapping into knowledge of future events? The mathematical odds of getting this many specific details right by pure accident are so ridiculously small that they challenge everything we understand about probability. What makes it even more unsettling is that it wasn't just the big picture stuff that matched. It was the tiny details, the specific circumstances, the tragic human cost. Everything lined up perfectly between fiction and reality. Robertson didn't just predict a big ship would sink. He predicted exactly how it would sink, where it would sink, when it would sink, and why so many people would die. This is the kind of coincidence that doesn't just make you think. It makes you wonder if the future is somehow accessible to people who know where to look. If certain patterns repeat themselves with mathematical precision. If some events are so inevitable that they cast shadows backward through time. But that's just the start. What you've heard so far is barely scratching the surface of coincidences so impossible they'll make you question everything. Our next one involves two of the most famous presidents in American history, and a pattern so precise it feels like someone was deliberately messing with the timeline. The lives and deaths of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy are connected by coincidences so specific and numerous that they push the definition of chance way past its breaking point. Let's start with the election dates that'll make your head hurt. Lincoln was first elected to Congress in 1846. Kennedy was first elected to Congress in 1946. That's exactly 100 years apart. Lincoln became president in 1860. Kennedy became president in 1960. Another perfect century gap. This isn't rough timing or close enough. This is mathematical precision that shouldn't exist. Both men were committed to civil rights. Both brought new energy to politics. Both faced opposition from people who thought they were going too far. Both challenged the system in ways that probably made a lot of powerful people nervous, maybe even angry enough to want them gone. But here's where it gets even weirder with the family stuff. Both presidents were succeeded by vice presidents named Johnson. Both Johnsons were Southern Democrats. Andrew Johnson, who became president after Lincoln died, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who took over when Kennedy was killed, was born in 1908. Another perfect 100-year gap. Like someone was deliberately setting this up to mess with historians. The assassination details push this whole thing into territory that makes you seriously question if reality is even real. Both presidents got shot in the head on a Friday. Both were sitting next to their wives when it happened. Lincoln died at Ford's Theatre. Kennedy died while riding in a Lincoln, which was made by Ford. The location thing creates this perfect mirror that feels orchestrated. Their killers follow the exact same pattern too. John Wilkes Booth killed Lincoln. He was born in 1838. Lee Harvey Oswald shot Kennedy, born in 1939. Another century gap. Both assassins went by their full three names, which wasn't super common back then or now really. Both names have exactly 15 letters when you write them out completely. The escape routes create this almost poetic symmetry that shouldn't exist. Booth shot Lincoln in a theatre, then ran to a warehouse. Specifically a tobacco barn, where they cornered him and he died. Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse, the Texas school book depository, then fled to a movie theatre where they grabbed him. It's a perfect reversal. Theatre to warehouse, warehouse to theatre. Like someone scripted it that way on purpose. Both assassins got killed before they could stand trial. Booth was shot by federal soldiers who had him surrounded. Oswald got gunned down by Jack Ruby while he was in police custody, with millions watching on television. Neither one lived to explain why they did it or if other people were involved. Even the tiny details follow this supernatural pattern. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy who supposedly warned him not to go to Ford's Theatre that night. Kennedy had a secretary named Evelyn Lincoln who allegedly told him not to go to Dallas. Both men ignored the warnings and went anyway. The names create another layer of impossible synchronicity. Lincoln's last name has 7 letters. Kennedy's last name has 7 letters. Both were tall, skinny guys with distinctive looks that made them easy to recognize. Both had health problems they hid from everyone during their time in office. These coincidences have fed conspiracy theories for decades. Skeptics say that if you look at enough data points, you can find patterns anywhere. They argue that human brains naturally detect connections, even when there aren't any. They claim that focusing on similarities while ignoring differences creates fake patterns that seem more important than they really are. But the sheer volume of Lincoln Kennedy parallels feels different from random pattern recognition. We're not talking about vague similarities or close timing. We're talking about exact dates, perfect numerical gaps, circumstances so specific that calculating the odds requires numbers with more zeros than most people can comprehend. This isn't just two presidents getting assassinated. This is a historical echo repeating itself with mechanical precision across exactly 100 years. Like someone took Lincoln's life, moved it forward a century, and replayed it with different people, but identical circumstances. The odds of all these coincidences happening by pure chance are so ridiculously small, they challenge how we understand events unfolding in reality. We're forced to consider possibilities that make rational people uncomfortable. Are we seeing evidence that history operates in cycles with predetermined patterns? Could there be hidden forces orchestrating events across generations? Does the universe occasionally reveal glimpses of some deeper order governing human affairs in ways we can't comprehend? What makes the Lincoln-Kennedy thing even more unsettling is the emotional impact. These weren't just statistical anomalies or amusing numerical patterns. These were tragic events that shaped American history and caused massive suffering. The fact that such profound tragedies would repeat themselves with mathematical precision adds this disturbing dimension. The parallels don't just break your brain because they're statistically impossible. They break your brain because they suggest that sometimes history doesn't just rhyme like Mark Twain said. Sometimes history repeats itself with such perfect accuracy, it feels like we're living inside some vast cosmic program that occasionally glitches and shows us the underlying code. But that's not even the strangest one. What comes next involves a king meeting his exact double under circumstances so impossible they make the Lincoln-Kennedy parallels look almost normal. Our next coincidence takes us to Italy in 1900, where King Umberto I was having dinner at a small restaurant in the city of Monza on July 28th. When the restaurant owner came over to take his order, the king almost choked on his wine. Standing in front of him was a man who looked exactly like him. Not similar, not close, exactly identical, like staring into a mirror. Fascinated and probably a little freaked out, King Umberto started talking to his doppelganger. What happened next defies every law of probability. The restaurant owner's name was also Umberto. Both men were born in the same city, Turin. Both shared the exact same birthday, March 14th, 1844. Both had married women named Margherita on the very same day. And here's where your brain completely malfunctions. The restaurant owner had opened his establishment on the precise date that Umberto was crowned King of Italy. The king was absolutely fascinated by these impossible synchronicities. He felt this weird connection to this stranger who shared not just his face, but his entire life pattern. During their conversation, the king learned that his double had served in the same military regiment, but never got any honours for his service. Moved by this, King Umberto promised to knight the man and invited him to attend an athletic competition the next day as his personal guest. The next morning, July 29th, King Umberto showed up at the sporting event looking for his mysterious twin in the crowd. An aide came over with devastating news. The restaurant owner wouldn't be attending. Earlier that morning, he'd been shot and killed in a street altercation near the venue. The king was shocked, deeply saddened at learning his double had died violently. As King Umberto was processing this tragic news, an anarchist named Gaetano Bresci came out of the crowd. He raised his revolver and fired 4 shots directly into the king's chest. King Umberto collapsed and died within minutes, killed by an assassin's bullet just hours after his identical twin met the same violent fate. 2 men who shared the same name, same face, same birthday, same birthplace, same wife's name, same wedding date, same key life events, both killed by gunshots on consecutive days in the same city. The mathematical probability requires numbers with more zeros than most calculators can display. This isn't just a story about look-alikes or amusing similarities. This is two lives perfectly synchronized from birth to death, connected by threads so intricate and precise they seem woven by some supernatural force. The king and his double lived parallel existences that converged for one magical evening before ending in identical tragedy within 24 hours. What makes this even more haunting is the emotional weight of their brief encounter. King Umberto felt genuine affection for his double and wanted to honor him. The restaurant owner seemed equally moved. For one brief moment, these two identical souls recognized something profound in each other before fate claimed them both in the most brutal way imaginable. These stories we're exploring aren't just statistical curiosities. They're windows into something deeper, something that suggests reality might operate according to rules we don't understand yet. The patterns are too precise, the timing too perfect, the details too specific to dismiss as random chance. Each coincidence builds on the last, creating a cumulative weight of evidence that pushes against everything we think we know about probability and cause and effect. And we're just getting started. What's coming next will push these boundaries even further into territory that makes rational explanation nearly impossible. Our fourth reality-shattering coincidence involves a story so dark and prophetic that it makes horror novels look tame by comparison. In 1838, Edgar Allan Poe published his only full-length novel, a seafaring adventure called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. The book had this gruesome scene where 4 shipwrecked sailors, starving and desperate on a life raft, make the horrific decision to resort to cannibalism to survive. They draw lots to determine who gets sacrificed, and a young cabin boy named Richard Parker draws the short straw. He gets killed and eaten by his 3 surviving companions. It was fiction, a dark, twisted tale from the mind of America's master of macabre literature. Except 46 years later, art imitated life with precision so chilling it would have impressed Poe himself. In 1884, an English yacht called the Mignonette set sail from Southampton bound for Sydney, Australia. During the voyage, the ship encountered a massive storm and sank in the South Atlantic. 4 crew members managed to escape in a small lifeboat. Their names were Captain Tom Dudley, Edwin Stevens, Edmund Brooks, and a 17-year-old cabin boy named Richard Parker. Yes, you heard that correctly, Richard Parker, the exact same name as the fictional victim in Poe's novel, written nearly half a century earlier. Adrift for weeks with no food and virtually no fresh water, the 4 men grew increasingly desperate. They managed to catch the occasional turtle, but it wasn't nearly enough to sustain them. The young cabin boy, Richard Parker, became ill after drinking seawater in his desperation. Seeing that the boy was near death, Captain Dudley proposed the unthinkable. They should kill Richard Parker and consume his body to save themselves. After agonizing debate, they committed the act. Parker was killed, and the remaining 3 men fed on his corpse. They were rescued just days later by a passing ship thousands of miles from any land. The subsequent legal case became a landmark in English law, establishing the precedent that necessity is not a legal defense for murder. But for students of literature and impossible coincidences, this case represents something far more disturbing. A real-life tragedy that perfectly mirrored the fictional horror story written 46 years earlier. A cabin boy named Richard Parker sacrificed at sea by starving crewmates in identical circumstances. The odds of this specific name appearing in both the fictional and real versions of this exact scenario are beyond astronomical. Poe had no way of knowing that his dark imagination would become prophetic reality decades later. He couldn't have predicted that someone with the precise name of his fictional victim would find himself in identical circumstances, facing the same horrific fate. Yet somehow, his fictional nightmare became real with surgical accuracy that defies every rational explanation. This coincidence forces us to confront deeply unsettling questions about the relationship between imagination and reality. Can creative minds sometimes access information about future events? Do certain tragic patterns repeat themselves across time with mathematical precision? Or did Poe somehow tap into a darker truth about human nature and survival that made his fictional scenario inevitable? The Richard Parker coincidence doesn't just break your brain because of its statistical impossibility. It breaks your brain because it suggests that sometimes fiction doesn't just reflect reality. Sometimes fiction creates reality or predicts it with such accuracy that the boundary between imagination and future truth becomes terrifyingly thin. Our fifth mind-bending coincidence involves a man who seemed to be cosmically synchronized with one of the most famous celestial objects in our solar system. Mark Twain, America's beloved humorist and author, was born on November 30th, 1835, just 2 weeks after the appearance of Halley's comet. This famous comet, visible from Earth only once every 75 to 76 years, was making one of its rare appearances when Samuel Clemens entered the world. Twain grew up knowing about this cosmic connection and felt a deep personal bond with the celestial visitor that had marked his birth. As he aged, he began making what seemed like outrageous predictions about his own death. In 1909, he was quoted as saying something that would prove to be prophetically accurate, in the most impossible way. He declared that he had come into the world with Halley's comet in 1835, and he expected to go out with it when it returned. He said it would be the greatest disappointment of his life if he didn't die when the comet made its next appearance. Twain claimed that the Almighty had created two unaccountable freaks, himself and the comet, and that they came in together and must go out together. The universe decided to grant his wish with timing so precise it seems impossible. Mark Twain died of a heart attack on April 21st, 1910. Halley's comet had made its closest approach to Earth the day before, on April 20th. He literally came in with the comet and went out with it exactly as he had predicted a year earlier. This isn't just a case of someone making a lucky guess about their death. This is a man who seemed to understand his cosmic connection to a celestial object and accurately predicted the timing of his own demise based on that connection. The mathematical odds of this prediction coming true with such precision are staggering. Twain's comet coincidence represents something beautiful and poetic in a list of otherwise dark and disturbing synchronicities. It's as if the universe wanted to give one of America's greatest writers a perfectly symmetrical and meaningful exit from the world stage. The man who spent his life finding humor and irony in the human condition got to experience the ultimate cosmic irony as his final act. What makes this coincidence even more remarkable is Twain's apparent awareness of the pattern before it completed itself. He didn't just experience a cosmic synchronicity, he predicted it, announced it publicly, and then lived to see it fulfilled with astronomical precision. It's the kind of coincidence that suggests some people are born with an intuitive understanding of their place in the cosmic order. Our sixth mind-breaking coincidence takes us into the realm of genetics and human behavior in ways that will fundamentally challenge everything you believe about free will and individual choice. In 1940, identical twin boys were born in Ohio and separated at just a few weeks old. They were adopted by different families who had no knowledge of each other's existence. Both adoptive families, by pure coincidence, decided to name their new son James. One became James Springer, the other James Lewis. For 39 years, these two men lived completely separate lives, unaware that an identical version of themselves existed somewhere in the world. When they were finally reunited in 1979, what they discovered defied every rational explanation for human behavior and personal choice. Both James twins were exactly 6 feet tall and weighed 180 pounds. During childhood, both had owned a dog named Toy. Both excelled at mathematics, but struggled with spelling in school. Both enjoyed woodworking as a hobby and showed talent for mechanical drawing. These similarities might be explained by shared genetics, but what happened next pushes coincidence into supernatural territory. Both men had married women named Linda. Both had divorced their wives named Linda and subsequently married women named Betty. Both had sons whom they named James Allen, though one spelled the middle name differently. Both worked part-time as sheriff's deputies. Both were chain smokers who preferred Salem cigarettes. Both drove light blue Chevrolet automobiles of the same model and year. The medical parallels were equally impossible. Both suffered from tension headaches that began at the same age. Both were compulsive nail biters. Both had gained and lost exactly 10 pounds at the same point in their adult lives. Both took vacations at the same small beach resort in Florida, sometimes during the same weeks, without ever encountering each other. These weren't just surface-level similarities or coincidental preferences. These were life choices, medical conditions, and behavioral patterns that seemed to be encoded in their DNA. The Jim twins became the subjects of intensive scientific study at the University of Minnesota, where researchers were investigating how genetics influence human behavior. Their case provided compelling evidence that our genes control far more of our lives than anyone had previously imagined. From career choices and hobbies to the names we give our children and the brands we prefer, the Jim twins suggested that free will might be more limited than we want to believe. What makes their story even more unsettling is the implication that our most personal decisions might not be personal at all. If identical genetics can lead to marrying women with the same names, choosing identical career paths, and developing the same medical problems, what does that say about human individuality and the choices we think we're making independently? These 10 impossible coincidences force us to confront the most fundamental questions about reality itself. Are we witnessing evidence of hidden patterns that govern our universe? Could there be forces beyond our comprehension, orchestrating events with mathematical precision? Or are these simply the most remarkable statistical anomalies ever documented? The truth is, science cannot explain these synchronicities. Mathematics cannot calculate their probability. Logic cannot rationalize their existence. Yet here they are, documented and verified, challenging everything we thought we knew about chance, fate, and the nature of existence. Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that these coincidences aren't rare exceptions to reality's rules, but glimpses of how reality actually operates beneath the surface. Maybe the universe is far stranger, more interconnected, and more mysteriously orchestrated than our limited human perspective allows us to understand. These stories don't just break your brain because they're impossible. They break your brain because they suggest that impossibility itself might be more possible than we ever dare to imagine. Looking at these stories all together, what starts to hit you is that maybe we've been thinking about coincidence all wrong. Maybe what we call coincidence is just our limited way of understanding patterns we're not equipped to see. Like trying to understand a symphony when you can only hear one note at a time. These aren't just flukes. They're too consistent, too detailed, too surgically precise in ways that break the math we use to calculate probability. Robertson, writing about the Titan 14 years before the Titanic, went down with identical details. Lincoln and Kennedy separated by exactly 100 years but living mirror image lives. King Umberto meeting his perfect double, only to have both die within hours by gunfire. Poe's fictional Richard Parker becoming a real Richard Parker who met the exact same fate decades later. Mark Twain coming in with Halley's Comet and going out with it just like he predicted. The Jim twins living identical lives, down to their dogs' names and the brands of cigarettes they smoked without ever meeting. Every single one of these pushes against what we think is possible. And here's what really messes with your head. These are just the ones we know about, the documented cases, the stories that got written down and verified. How many other impossible coincidences happen every day that nobody notices? How many patterns are unfolding around us right now that we're too blind to see? Maybe reality isn't the solid, predictable thing we pretend it is. Maybe time doesn't flow in neat, straight lines. Maybe the future can reach backward and leave traces in the past. Maybe some people can somehow access information from events that haven't happened yet. Or maybe, and this might be the most unsettling possibility, maybe everything is connected in ways so complex and intricate that what looks like coincidence to us is actually evidence of some vast underlying order we're not smart enough to comprehend. These stories force you to pick. Either you accept that reality occasionally produces statistical impossibilities, so unlikely they shouldn't exist, or you accept that we don't understand how reality actually works, that there are forces and patterns and connections operating beyond what our science can measure or our logic can explain. Neither option is comfortable. Both mess with everything we think we know about how the world operates. But the evidence is there, documented, verified, impossible to dismiss. So next time something happens that feels too coincidental, too perfectly timed, too impossibly aligned to be random chance, maybe don't brush it off so quickly. Maybe pay attention, because these 10 stories suggest that the universe might be trying to show us something about the nature of time, fate, and the hidden architecture of existence itself. Something we're only just beginning to glimpse through these cracks in reality, where the impossible becomes real and coincidence stops being coincidental.